Hello, all in Lewisburg. It's wonderful to be with you. So I'm Anne Griffin, and I've written this book, When All Is Said. Loads of copies, just in case you forget who I am. So I am talking to you from Mullingar, from the Midlands. So it's lovely to be speaking to you all over in Mayo, a place that is very dear to my heart. I lived in Westport for a little while. And one of my favourite journeys in the whole world is that drive from Lewisburg over to Leenane. So I am very jealous of what you have there. It's such a beautiful community. And I had years ago in a job I had in Mayo, I ended up visiting Lewisburg Primary School, and so I'd say all of those children have now grown up and have families of their own. So it's a real honour. So I want to thank Des and I want to thank Breed, who asked me to come on tonight. And there is a specific reason why I've been asked to come on, because the genesis of this book, the reason why this wonderful journey that I'm on all started, was because of a very brief meeting with a man in a hotel in Mayo. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about the book, and I'll get into the story of how this all happened. But for those of you who don't know, When All Is Said is the story of a very successful Meath farmer, an 84-year-old Meath farmer called Maurice Hannigan. And Maurice sits to the bar of his local hotel, the Rainsford House Hotel, one very significant evening in his life. And he is there to drink 5 toasts to the 5 most important people in his life. And through that, and through their stories, we learn just who Maurice Hannigan is. And we learn all about him. And he's a bit of a character. And I hope people find him lovable. And actually they have, because this book has done quite well. It came out last January, and it hit the bestseller list in Ireland for 5 weeks. It was at the top, and then it was in and out of the bestseller list for the entire year. And then I had a wonderful end to the year by winning the Newcomer of the Year in the Irish Book Awards. And it is being published in 16 foreign languages, as well as being published in the States. So I'm very lucky that people have really taken to Maurice Hannigan and taken him to their hearts like I hoped they would. He is cantankerous, and he's funny, and he is a vulnerable man also. So the 5 toasts. So we meet his brother Tony, who died when Maurice was very young, and he died of TB. And Maurice, to this day, is still heartbroken by the loss of him. The next person we meet is Noreen, who is Maurice's sister-in-law. And Noreen has lived in an institution all her life, but she is key to unlocking the secret of a King Edward VIII coin, very expensive sovereign that actually does exist, that weaves its way through the entire story. So it's like this wonderful little undercurrent going through the story of Maurice Hannigan's life. We then meet Molly. And I'll be reading a piece from Molly's chapter. Molly was Maurice's daughter, but she was stillborn. So it's quite a moving chapter, and one of my favourite chapters to read from. And then the next toast is to Kevin. Now, Kevin is Maurice's son, and Kevin lives in New Jersey. And Kevin is a journalist. And this is something that Maurice his whole life has had difficulty with, because one of the things about Maurice is he is dyslexic. And like most dyslexic people, they are extremely intelligent. They are really excellent strategists. And they succeed because they figure out how they need to succeed, with this huge secret very often hanging over their shoulders. So Maurice has now never actually told Kevin that he is dyslexic. And in fact, the entire book is addressed to Kevin. It's like a love story to Kevin in a way, or a love song in a way to Kevin, from a father who is admitting, you know what, son, I never really told you who I was, but I want you to know now. And then the final toast is to Sadie, his beloved Sadie, his wife, who died 2 years ago. So this is the basic story of When All Is Said. And I'm going to start, before I get into the Mayo connection, I want to start with a little passage that comes from Kevin's Toast. And I thought it was appropriate to start with this because it's a lovely short little passage, and also because the entire book is addressed to Kevin. Now, Kevin isn't with Morris, so Morris is sitting at this bar on his own, and he's talking to Kevin in his head, essentially. That's what this is. So this is a lovely, lovely little passage, and one of my favourites. And in fact, just to give you another little bit of information about this book, it was one of the passages that my editor, the person who bought this book from Scepter, which is a major publisher in the UK, it was this passage that she really, really loved. So here we go. When you were small, no more than 4, I came in late one evening. The kitchen was empty, spick and span as it always was straight after the dinner. I knew Sadie would have been elbow deep in soapy water, scrubbing the kitchen back to order not an hour before. My place lay set at the table, and as I lifted the saucepan lid off my dinner and stuck it in the aga, I could hear your voices from down the hall. I sat to the Meath Chronicle, perusing the market news. Try as I might not to let it, the laughter got the better of me in the end, and I left the paper down and headed in your direction. The bathroom door was open, and as I passed it, I could see the bath still quarter full, with a couple of surviving suds and a yellow duck floating among them. I held back in the hallway, peering in at the pair of you next door in your bedroom. Kevin, I love you. Your mammy loves you, Sadie said, marking every word with a kiss to her tummy as you lay on the ground being dried. She loves every bone of you. Do you know that? Mm-hmm, you replied, happily watching puffs of white rise from the Johnson's baby powder container every time you pressed its middle. And does Kevin love Kevin? Puff upon puff of whiteness filled the air. Does Kevin love Kevin? I repeated in my head. You didn't reply. Instead, you turned the talcum powder upside down, shaking it vigorously onto your tummy and the floor. Because if you love this wee boy, she continued, dispersing the powder all over you, and are always kind to him and always try to understand him, then I think he will be the happiest little man in the whole wide world. She used the corner of the bath towel to rub the white smatterings from the carpet. Will you do that? Will you love Kevin for me, will you rascal? She asked, administering another tickle that let loose more squeals of laughter. I never disturbed you, but made my way back into our darkened bedroom and sat on the side of the bed, looking out at the silhouette of our trees and hills and against the night sky, brightened by one of the biggest moons I'd ever seen. It was too much, even for me, a man of 43, to try to comprehend what Sadie had said, let alone a child of 4. Loving yourself. The very thought. I reached for the bedside lamp, fumbling to find the switch under the shade. I pulled the curtains closed and stood looking at the brown flowers with their orange centres, one after another, row upon row. My finger rose to follow the pattern of the petals, my blackened nail and layers of hardened skin that had no hope of feeling the fibre circled anyway. Oh, you're home, Sadie said from the door behind me. Yeah, I thought I'd change out of these, I said, my fingers pulling away from the flowers, pretending at taking off my jumper. First for everything, I suppose. I left the dinner for you. I saw that. This man's off to bed. Her head nodded in the direction of your room. Are you coming in to say goodnight? I'll be in now. How many times did Sadie talk to you that way, I wonder? And is that why you are the man you are, so sure and happy in your life? So that was a part of the Kevin Toast. So I promised that I'd tell you where the Mayo connection comes into this book. I started to write in 2013, and I was 43, so I'm very late to the craft. So all you people out there that think, to be a writer, you have to be wanting to be a writer from the time you were in nappies. It's not true. I didn't realise I wanted to be a writer until I was 43. Now, I worked in the industry, I worked in the book industry for about 8 years in my 20s. But certainly I had no aspirations for writing. Writers were these other special breed of people, like astronauts or surgeons or something, stuff that I wasn't going to be doing. But anyway, I came to a crossroads in my life, age 43, and a friend of mine was a writer, said, why don't you write? And I thought, well, okay then, let's give it a go. And I had written a book in 1943, aging myself slightly there, in 2013. Yes, I wrote a book in 2013. It wasn't particularly good, and I wrote it never with the intention of getting it published. I just wanted to see, my goodness, do I have the stamina to write 70,000 words? And sure enough, I did, and it's still in a press, never to be opened or to be read again. But I was on the lookout for another story, and it happened that I came across that story in Mayo. So myself and my husband and my son, who was about 8 at the time, and we were cycling the Greenway from Westport to Achill. And we had stopped into Newport, into the hotel that's just at the end of the street in Newport. And we went into the bar. It was around tea time, but there was nobody in the bar except for one man. And this man was quite tall, and he was in his 70s, and he had a shocking head of white hair. It was really impressive. And, the man was itching to have a chat. And he came over with his pint, and we had a couple of minutes together. And I was a bit flustered trying to get the food and sort us out. But in those couple of minutes, he told me 2 things that have never left me. The first one was that he worked in that house or in that hotel when he was a child. But the second one, this was it. This was the big one. He told me before disappearing, before walking away to talk to I'm not going to see the morning. And that was it. And he walked away. Now, please, I don't want loads of people telling me they know who that man was, because when I was up doing the wonderful Rolling Sun Festival back in, it was November last year, a couple of people said, I think I might know who that man is. And I was like, no, don't ruin the moment for me. I just want that moment when this man sparked my creative imagination. Because the next day I cycled in your good old west of Ireland rain. I mean, I am talking about that wind and that just coming off, hitting you slantways, hurting your face. I cycled the last leg from Mulranny out to Achill Island, thinking about what that man had said, and came up with the idea of a man sitting to the bar of a hotel to drink 5 toasts to the 5 most important people in his life. So, on that note, my last reading, I have chosen specifically because I wanted to get a sense of that hotel, and a sense of just that moment when I met that man. And so this piece that I've chosen is a little bit longer than the last, but this refers to when Morris meets a very important woman in his life. Her name is Emily, and she runs the Rainsford House Hotel. And like that man who I met that night, Morris had worked in the hotel, or the big house as it was, when he was a boy. Now, he'd had a particularly bad experience, especially at the hands of Emily's great uncle, Thomas. So for years, Morris harboured a grudge against this family who owned this hotel and would not cross its boundary, would not go into the hotel until his son, Kevin, told him that that's where he wanted to get married. And so the wedding had to be arranged there. And Morris was forced back into a place that had really hurt him quite badly. And the piece I have chosen here is when Morris meets Emily. And for some reason, Emily reminds him a lot of who he felt Molly would grow up to be, his daughter who was stillborn. So, I'm going to start. As I say, it's a little bit longer, and this should bring us to the end of this lovely time with Louisburg. It's been a complete honour. And I really want to thank you all for extending this invitation, and I want to wish you all well, and I want to wish you safety, and I want to wish you good health in these really, really difficult times. At first I thought I was going a bit mad, thinking she was like Molly. But over the months, when I got to know her more, the feeling didn't change. In fact, if anything, it got stronger. It was her character, her graciousness, her courageousness with life, thrown as she was into this place, her life choices taken from her so young. There she was, her father having died, left with a broken-hearted mother and a hotel to run. Hilary, the mother, hadn't an ounce of interest in it, Emily told me later. Had been dead set against it becoming a hotel in the first place. In fact, when she'd first met Jason in Dublin, in his family-owned hotel, she thought she'd found her way out. A way to be rid of the crumbling house. Rachel and Reggie, her parents, seemed to hate it as much as her. If that's what he wants, Hilary, let him have it, Rachel had told her daughter when she'd first heard of Jason's plan. Frankly, I don't care what he does. I just want heat. For once in my lifetime in this blasted place, I'd like to feel warm. If he can manage that, then he can build a bloody zoo. Emily's legacy, the Rainsford House Hotel. Had she lived, Molly that is, I believe she would have lived her life like Emily, always writing things and sorting things with that same selflessness. I feel like she'd have taken her father in hand. I might be a different man altogether. I'm not the ogre they make me out to be, you know, I said, that first day as I stood across from Emily. She lowered her head to the computer to make the booking for your stay. I didn't say you were. You didn't have to. I paused, searching her face, wondering if she might let me in at all. It was odd, this worrying about what others thought of me. Sorry, something has just happened here, and I'm hoping that I'm still live. You didn't have to. I paused, searching her face, wondering if she might let me in at all. It was an odd sensation, this worrying about what other people thought of me. It was all just business, you know, buying the land, nothing personal. I coughed then, and felt myself floundering around like some fish washed up on a beach. But somehow I got myself together and said this: it can't be easy with your father gone. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me for what seemed like ages, like she was trying to figure me out. I said nothing. I was a bit stumped as to where to go from there. It was then I noticed her tears. She leaned her elbows on the desk and sobbed. Funny, isn't it, what you remember in those moments of panic? It was the sound of jingling coins. I must have had my hands in my pockets foostering with my money while I stood looking at her like a mute gom. Ah, here, I might have managed. Or maybe I stretched out my hand on the counter to attempt some kind of useless comfort. Wait there, I do remember saying after a bit, when things weren't looking like they were getting any better. I'd be back. I went off to the bar, returning with 2 Bushmills, only to find her missing. Bold as you like, I went around the counter and knocked on the office door. Not waiting for a reply, I opened it to find her with her head still in her hands at a desk. Drink this, I said, as I placed the whiskey beside her. It'll steady you. She looked at it, then me, smelt it before taking some and grimacing. Yeah, it takes a bit of getting used to, all right, I said, having a healthy mouthful of my own. They hate you, Mr. Hannigan, she said, after swallowing her second mouthful. You paid them far too little for far too much. That's what they've always told me. They're not wrong. I'm a businessman, I'll not apologise for that. Surprisingly, she gave the briefest of smiles. She was more composed now, sitting back in her seat. She gestured to a chair opposite her at the other side of the desk. I took it and sat, as she tapped her fingernails at the glass, watching the liquid shiver under the impact. It killed him. This place, this bloody dream of his, had killed my father, she continued, not looking at me, but at the whiskey, before tipping it back, shuddering, and laying the empty glass on the desk before her. We are in debt up to our necks, she added, speaking to the empty tumbler. And my mother, well, what can I say? She's broken-hearted, totally out of it. She can't face the mess, losing money hand over fist in a hotel that no one will want to buy. You're trying to sell? I asked. Oh, no, it's not on the market, not yet anyway. That's what I'm here for, to try to figure it all out. Mother's drugged up to the eyeballs. So it's just me. It's all up to me. She looked about her, surveying her empire. And look at the fine job I'm doing, she laughed, as her hand gestured enthusiastically in my direction, while those big, clear eyes of hers came to rest on mine, confessing all to the enemy. Does that make you happy, Mr. Hannigan? She asked, leaning into the desk towards me, to know that we are at last about to fall. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and congratulations on this wonderful community initiative. It's really impressive in these hard times. Loved every minute of it. Best of luck, everybody in Lewisburg. Thanks a million.